Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reed with Future Pastimes, and I'm the designer of the ECAS and Moritani expansion, the third expansion for Dune, the 2019 edition from Gale Force 9. And one of the variants in this expansion is something called Homeworlds, where each faction has a homeworld to keep their reserves. And we're going to focus on one in particular, and that is Grumman. Grumman is the homeworld for House Moritani, and that's one of the new factions on there. So it's a world of plains where wild horses run free. And the way that this works is you're going to keep your reserves on this planet token. So Moritani, they start with 6 forces on Arrakis, and the rest of them will be on Grumman. And that's where you have your reserves out in front of your shield, because your reserves is public information. And you'll have an accompanying homeworld card that has a high threshold side and a low threshold side, and that refers to the number of forces you have in your reserves. And while you're at high threshold, which for Moritani is at least 8 of their forces on Grumman, they're going to have an additional advantage in the game, and that advantage is that they can add a terror token to a stronghold that already has one, or remove a terror token from the board during spice collection and gain 4 spice from the spice bank. So normally the Moritani, they cannot add a terror token to a stronghold that already has one. Now that's the only place they can place terror tokens is in strongholds, not including the Ixian hidden mobile stronghold. They can't place one there. But being able to place a second one really acts as a strong deterrent. Nobody is interested in triggering 1 terror token, let alone 2. And so that can be very effective, but it's also a potential income. So after the end of the first round is when they're going to be able to put a terror token down. They do that in the Mentat pause. So after everything is done, the dust is settled for the end of a game turn, they're going to put a terror token optionally, but they almost always do, into a stronghold. And then when forces enter that stronghold by shipment or by movement belonging to another faction, the Moritani have the chance to trigger that token for something awful, typically, to happen to that faction. Though not always, so because nobody knows what they are. They're all face down. But Moritani doesn't otherwise have an income. So if they're willing to pull one of those tokens off, they can get the spice from it. Now they can still place one. So that's not replacing their placement altogether. So if they could pull one off, get the spice for it, and then place one. So they still get to do that. But they're ultimately, at the end of that game turn, where they would have placed the second one, there still only be the one. So it's an interesting decision for Moritani. It's nice that they've got a potential spice income. If Chom Charity is not going to be cutting it for them, they want to have at least a couple more spice. But I think it's even more terrifying that they can double up those tokens. Now, once they dip down to 7 or fewer forces, they're going to flip that over. They'll lose that high threshold advantage. And then while they're at low advantage, they've got a little bit of a handicap, and it's a tough one for Moritani. They can't reveal a terror token. They can't trigger its effect unless at least 3 forces enter the territory it is in. So if somebody's like, I'm only going to send in 2 forces, Moritani can't reveal that token and trigger its effect. Now, most of the time, your Moritani, especially if they're using it as a deterrent, they're not having to worry about 2 forces. So it's still going to be relatively effective to have that, have those tokens on there. The other thing that can happen, though, is that you can attack other players' homeworlds using your shipping action to ship forces to that homeworld, and you can fight the native faction there, or if they've removed all of their reserves, you can just immediately occupy it. And there is an occupy advantage. So first of all, you're going to get 2 spice income from the spice bank in the spice collection phase just for occupying this particular homeworld. But you will have another effect, and that is Moritani cannot reveal a terror token when you, the occupier, or your ally enters a territory containing one. So that is an incentive to attack and occupy Grumman, is that you basically nullify the terror tokens for you. So you and your ally don't have to worry about them. The other factions still do, but that's going to be a nice thing, especially if you're like, all right, we need to go into that stronghold, but we're pretty sure it's atomics or assassination or just some other horrible thing that we don't want to endure. So that is how Grumman works for Moritani. So scary high threshold, kind of a little bit of a painful low threshold penalty, although not insurmountable for Moritani. But they do need to worry about somebody occupying them, especially if they're relying on those terror tokens to help them to deter people from giving them any trouble in the strongholds that they occupy, or to, reserve, like I'm putting that terror token there because that's where I want to go in the next game turn. And other factions maybe don't want to experience whatever is going to happen there. So it's a fun faction to play, and the thing is, Homeworld is also fun to have in the game when you have Moritani as your playing faction. So that's how that one works. Let me know if you have any questions about it. If you've had a chance to see Homeworlds in play with Grumman, let me know how that went. What did you think of it? Especially if you were playing Moritani, or how did it impact your game if you were not Moritani? Interested to hear those stories. That's it, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.